Hey there, welcome to SharkCast, podcast dedicated to the greatest sporting club in the history of the world, the mighty Cronulla Sharks. This Monday morning episode is brought to you by Dyson Logistics, the Royal Motor Yacht Club in Port Hacking, and Jason Hawes at Cripps and Cripps Real Estate. I am Sam Shinazzi, OG 2015, 11th season of podcasting, and I am joined by Kieran Fraser in what is his own show, catching up with Kieran over coffee about Cronulla. And I'm here to tell you all, like many of you listening and watching, this gentleman was at the game the week before last, as in our last game, and he can give us a eyewitness account of what did and didn't go down at Gosford Stadium. Let's just talk pre-game, Kieran. I mean, how was the catch-up with the family and the friends? How was the vibe?
Yeah, so look, it was actually surprisingly easy to get around. The Central Coast had a bit of floods that week, so I was a little bit skeptical on what Gosford would look like, but the pitch looked incredible. And then also too, like I've got PTSD from growing up on the Central Coast and trying to get a car spot near the stadium there. And the whole commuters car park was completely almost empty. So you were able to get a car spot right next to the ground. You didn't have to pay for parking too, which was quite nice after going through everything that we went through that night. So that got us off a little bit. But mate, it was great to be back up on the Central Coast, see some people that I know. But it all went south very quickly as soon as the ball was kicked. I think I looked up at the clock. It was 5 minutes. We hadn't touched the ball yet. And the next thing we know, it was 14-0. And yeah, it just didn't get any better, did it?
Now, can I ask you, did you see the warm-up?
I did see the warm-up.
What were your thoughts on the warm-up?
Well, I did see. I was texting you because I thought you probably would be getting your phone bombarded because Daniel Atkinson was down, getting a bit of treatment and things like that. But he turned out to be okay. He did a fitness test. He was fine. They looked good. They warmed up right in front of us. The seats that we were in were right kind of where the Sharks contingent was, and right behind sort of the Sharks bench. So mate, there was nothing that was a little bit off at all that they kind of came across. Everyone looked pumped, everyone looked happy. And then Gary was wearing this exact outfit, which I've modeled myself off today. And yeah, it was hard to detect what was coming.
And first few sets, Roosters making great ground. Did you have a feeling either before or after the first super try? Did you get a vibe or not really?
No, I mean, their first two tries that they scored were, very hard to defend tries. One, Tupu goes up in the air and takes that magnificent catch, and you sort of go, "How is this happening to us again? Like, come on, guys! Surely we've got a winger at the club that can take a high ball at this point." But then the next one, I think, was the Tedesco flick pass on the inside. Was it
No, there was two Tupos in a row.
two Tupos in a row? Okay, well,
Yeah.
I remember the one Tupo was particularly impressive, and then
Yeah,
the
the
next
first one,
one.
yep.
Yeah, then I remember. I don't really remember the second one that he scored. I just remember again, like it's happened again. We've just been outled
Yep.
like 4 times in a row or whatever. But the
Yep.
Tedesco one with that inside ball, you kind of cop and go,
Yes.
like that's almost like impossible to defend against. And the amount of possession that they had, and all the penalties were going their way. That young fella from the Central Coast was just banging goals from anywhere on the field. So it was just kind of like after 14 minutes, kind of just going like, how is this happening? And why are we going through this again? Because they set the bar so high the week before versus Melbourne, and that becomes the expectation. To dish that up, it just was unacceptable.
Yeah, we'll get to that. The discipline was kind of weird. I mean, we were down, I think, 5-0 on the penalty count, set restarts. We ended up winning the penalty count in the end, 8-7, just because of the way it all sort of pans out. But, whether we were that bad and they were that good, I can't tell you right now. But the discipline was no good, and some spilt ball, etc. And we didn't really stand a chance for a while. We got back to 14-6. What were you thinking then?
At 14-6, I still thought there was a chance, and even towards the end when we did score, and I think Trindle set one up, or he might have scored. It was probably like an 18, 20 point game, and there was still probably about 15 or so minutes left. And you sort of thought, well, if they can put it together, they can do this. But they just didn't look like they had the energy. They looked really flat.
Yeah.
Like from the eye test, you look at it and you go, we've got the players to do something, but from just looking at them, they just didn't look interested or Yeah, it was just it's hard because we've often spoke about this because when they lose, it feels like they really lose, right? But that was one of the occasions that when Fitzy had been here, that they just didn't turn up, and those performances are few and far between. But they really
Yeah.
looked like they were ready for that bye.
Yeah, so there's a few things floating around. There's the stat after you play Melbourne. I think maybe the Warriors are the only team that's won after playing Melbourne this year, and uh, that's quite a routine. It's quite a habit. It's not really a fluke thing. And now I'm not saying that's why we lost, but obviously we fall into that category. Our game against Melbourne was unbelievable. As you know, you were there. You saw them throw everything at them, down to 15 men, the whole thing. We know what happened. And they absolutely, one of the great victories of the last 15 years of the club. But they had a whole week to recover, both emotionally and physically. And that's what kind of stood out for me was that they just, I think, I mean, I'm not sure, but I think they had their eye on the bye. I don't for one second think that they took the Roosters lightly, but I think they had an eye on the bye. And I don't know what that feels like to just be, I mean, I guess I do one shift away from a week off work or whatever, but I still turn up to work and do my job.
Yeah, and it was one of those things where if that game was played at the SFS, do we use that as much of an excuse? Because I think they went up the day before. Is that the case? And stayed the night. So it's a night away from their family. They've done a lot of that sort of over this, and that's not an excuse. And I'm just trying to, in my head, piece together why you would mentally be just so off it. And I travel a lot
Mm,
for work. That's why we didn't do this show last week. I was in another country, and it is tiring for me. And I'm sick of it. And I'm not putting my body through what they're putting their body through, but emotionally and missing the family and all that type of stuff. That when you do know that there is a break coming up, you do really look forward to it. But I struggle to believe that was the case because again, they were so good the week before.
mm.
I just think that the Roosters absolutely pulled their pants down and gave it to them. And I always hate when we're playing teams that have so many guys out. And the Roosters had what 5 or 6 guys out in the end. And yeah, they brought in a young, enthusiastic bunch. And that's not the first time the Roosters have done that to a team this year. They bring in all these young, enthusiastic kids and put them to the sword. And we absolutely got put to the sword. And yeah, I was flabbergasted, to be honest, mate. I was very upset walking out of that stadium.
I think you make a good point because we can talk about them having the eye on the bye and that kind of thing, but you just put it pretty wisely. The Roosters actually outplayed them, which we know. We know that. It's not a surprise that that happened post game. We know that they outplayed them. But yeah, better team won on the night, and it sucks. And maybe it has nothing to do with the bye. Maybe if I raise that at the interviews this week with the players, they'd put one on my chin. I don't know. Like, I don't know how they would respond to something like that because it's an accusation. It's not a fact. No one can prove it,
Mm.
right? And sometimes a better team just wins on the day. So, yeah, what was the general mood like amongst Cronulla fans? Was it somber? Was it, oh, there's next week? What was in between? Or
So as soon as that first kick try happened, it was like all the Sharks fans kind of threw their hands in the air saying, we're not going to be putting up with this surely. Like, have our winger out jumped again after, the Atkinson experiment the week before. And then the second try, which I forgot about, happened off a kick as well. And,
yeah,
Sharks fans were just throwing their hands up in the air saying, like, what is going on here? Like, how can we not find a winger at the club that can catch a ball and all that type of stuff? Now, Daniel Tupu is what 6'4", 6'5", one of the best leapers in the history of the NRL, and Hiroti was just coming back off an injury. That's good coaching by the Roosters, and
yeah,
they executed that really well. So that's why sometimes you cop some of that stuff when you do go down 14-0 and you go, all right, we can fight our way back from this. But when the energy levels aren't there, it just wasn't that. And I think the fans also kind of got caught up in that too, because as soon as it went down to 14-0 in such a short period of time with no, like all the penalties going against us, everyone just kind of just looking at each other like, well, I guess it's not our day today. And well, we'll just wait for the next one because it just looked like everybody gave up, including the fans too. And rightfully so, because that was one of those performances where you're just looking there saying like, yeah, what's going on here?
yeah. I think for me, one of the disappointing aspects was that no one really put their hand up to say, follow me. Like, I'll say that AFB definitely did that because that's what he does every week, and he was fantastic again. But you need more than a prop doing that for you. And no one really took his lead. No one really said, all right, I'll go with you. from the forwards through to the backs. It just wasn't happening, and definitely one of those frustrating games because I said to some of the guys in the group chat, I said this could get to 50 at when it was 30 points, I think they had scored.
Yeah.
And there was still maybe 25 to go or more. I thought this could actually be the one where we get to 50. So thankfully it didn't for different reasons. It didn't get to 50, but still a pretty big score. It's our biggest loss since the Melbourne week 1 finals game. And I mean, I know for a fact, and you can count this as gospel, everyone listening and watching, that the coach was rather annoyed, and he definitely let the team know about it. He wasn't Mr. Nice Guy. He wasn't Mr. Quiet. He let the team know about it at full time.
Which is that's great to hear. The press conference for me was a little bit short, and I get that he was angry and he wanted to keep it short, and didn't want to expose things, and wanted to basically keep the serve in between the four walls, and probably didn't want to answer questions about the bye or going down 5 penalties and all that type of stuff. Right? He probably just wanted to get in the sheds and unload on the guys. But I'm somebody that watches those press conferences every week, and it gives me a bit of a gauge for where we are at and what he's feeling, because he's very guarded and very meticulous in his wordings that he uses, which I do like and appreciate. I don't want a coach going off like, they fill it at the Knights, all that type of stuff. Like there's no point in it, right? So I can understand that, but what I'd like to have seen a little bit more from that presser, just to kind of give some sort of explanation to the fans, because I took a night away from my family, and I was traveling away on Monday to go overseas for work, right? So I was only, in like a 7-day period, I was only with my kids for, 2 days there, and I spent one of those away from them for a big chunk of it to go watch the Sharks. And it was very frustrating, mate.
I was okay with it this week just because I think his few words said a whole lot, and I was okay with it. I don't think you want him to do it every loss, but I think I got the message I needed. But I appreciate what you're saying. Like, absolutely. I know you do love the presses and you get a lot out of it, and coincide with the fact that you did spend your hard earned and your very little spare time that you have, albeit by choice, but you still made that choice to go do that, support the club.
Yeah.
So I think there is absolutely some responsibility there from someone within the club to kind of take ownership. But I think in that 1 minute, because Fitzy's pretty generous with his time once you sit him down. Like once he's at the presser, he kind of doesn't shirk away from a lot. He may not give you a lot, but he doesn't shirk away from it. But I thought that actually made a bit of a statement. I don't know if he meant to or not, but I thought that made a bit of a statement.
Yeah, I see what you mean, right? And you could even see Cam was kind of sitting there like, it's kind of that thing at school where the teacher was going off and you're just sitting there waiting for your turn to cop it as well, and then the teacher's like done, and you're just like, oh, I can get out of here now. And it was a little bit like that. So it would have been really interesting to hear what Fitzy had going on that week. To your point earlier about following Fanua Blake, I just went and checked at some of the stats in terms of our go forward from last week, and there's a real drop off when it comes from Iro and Fanua Blake down to our next best forward, which is probably Britt at 101 meters. And again, when we're talking about our size, and should be one of our strong points for how we play the game and how we look the best, it stylistically it just didn't mirror up to the Sharks brand of football that we're trying to play. So I think there's probably no surprise there. That was such a bad performance when you actually look at the stats of the forwards outside of Fanua Blake, because even I felt like Britt had a couple of uncharacteristic errors in the last couple of weeks, and it could be just something that maybe the bye was looking to really help us with, because there's some bad stats there. Like Britt with 7 missed tackles, that's not Britt Nakora like, right? So yeah, maybe he needed to freshen up too.
Yeah, I think the other fellow who's copying a bit of criticism from the fans is Jesse Ramian, and we have to keep in mind they had a pretty bad eye injury the week before, but they deemed him fit enough to play, and he was way off his game last week, even from the kick defense for Hiroti, who was just left on his own for the first try at least.
Yeah.
So there are guys that need to sort of step up this week, which we'll talk about. But yeah, when you've got 2 players getting all your meters, one of them's a center, the other one's a prop, it's just not going to work. Like your halves won't be able to do things, your backs, it's just Yeah, it wasn't great. It wasn't a great night out.
But that gets compounded then again, right? When we play the McInnes, Dan Atkinson, and Sifo in that whole 13 role, right? So, it was
Yeah.
great that we had Acco a couple of weeks ago when we had an injury in the halves. But I
Yep.
think in games like that, when we're not getting the momentum and we're not getting the go forward that we need, that's when it can be really costly for us. Because again, Sifo didn't have one of his best games, but if we're trying to get that punch and we're trying to get that roll on, now that we don't have Tommy Hazelton as well on the bench, like we're going to need more from those sort of guys and more minutes, I think, to try and get that impact back. Because Tom's out for what, 3 months now? That's a
Yeah.
long time for Tommy to be out for, especially with his legs too, right? So it's going to be interesting to see
Yep.
how it goes.
So we are 24 hours away from naming the team for the Warriors, but we're led to believe at this stage Sione Katoa will be back, and I'm led to believe that Hiroti will hold his spot. So at this stage, there won't be a debutant. Now things can change in 24 hours. Things can change in a week, but that's what I am led to believe at the moment, that it'll be Katoa and Hiroti on the wings. How do you feel about that?
I don't have too much of an issue with it. I was listening to the podcast that I think you did with Gaz, and you kind of highlighted the fact that Katoa hasn't played really at all this year because he went down in that first trial, right? So look, that's going to be
Yeah.
a huge job for Sione to get back. Again, Sione's not the tallest winger, but
Yep.
I feel a level of comfort when Sione's there, especially with his combination that he has with Jesse Ramian. They go back to the 20s. They've been playing together since 2017 together. So I feel comfortable that he's back. In terms of Hiroti, he's got another week to get that injury right and to get all that sort of stuff back. He's been rock solid for us. That was his first game back from an injury. I will give him a bit of a pass on that one, because the alternative is we play a guy like Viella on the wing when he is a specialist center, right? And then
Yeah.
you're kind of getting into that realm of, are we making changes for the sake of changes? Daniel Atkinson can't be our winger. Like, we've seen that. We can't
Yeah.
do that again. So I'm not too sure the size of the wingers that are going to be coming up against this week for the Warriors. They've always got
Well,
big athletic wingers.
I'll give you a couple of names: Roger Tuivasa-Sheck and Dallin Watini-Zelezniak.
Not opportunity to DWZ again, mate. He pumped us last year at Shark Park, right? So again, if you're going up against that sort of experience, you're going to have to go with the Hiroti and you're going to have to go with Katoa. You can't risk putting a guy on Naboo out of position against one of those two, and you can't risk putting Acco out there either, I think.
It's interesting what you said about Viella, and we don't really talk about it enough because we're all sort of like saying, oh, well, he might debut this week, but he's actually a center. And I think he
Yeah,
has
he's
played
an
some
out-and-out
fullback.
centre.
He's played some wing, but he's a center. And I think it would be a tad much to ask him to do that. Some guys can do it, like, without being too sarcastic, like a Val Holmes. We saw him play a bunch of positions. Some guys can do it, but we've seen other guys come in and not be able to do it. So that is a risk.
Well, a classic example of that, Sam, is Jesse Ramian, right? So Jesse, when he first made his first top grade appearance for us, was on the wing in the World Club Challenge versus Wigan. Jesse is an out and out centre, and if you look at our depth chart, the guys that we sort of have that could cover both those positions are really, the guys like Hiroti. Because Stone Street, if there was injuries, you wouldn't put him in the centres necessarily,
No,
right? So there are
no.
specialist positions there. And if you look at a depth chart, once you get down to this level of injuries and suspensions with Ronnie being out, it really hurts because you only have one of those guys. And again, we're now looking at the 5th and 6th spot on our depth chart to try and fill this position, right? So you're not going to get an ideal situation. But I think the safest one is probably a guy like Hiroti with his experience and the fact he's played a number of games on the wing for us this year.
Yeah, and he'll learn from it from last week. Like, he knows that he obviously got out-leapt, but he'll learn. I think the third time they went to him, he caught it. So, like,
Yeah, he did.
It's not a hopeless situation. It just wasn't a great start to a game. And yeah, we'll see what else happens with the team lineup. But you think Teague Wilton might be ready? Yeah.
I think Teague has to be there. And I know Burns has had some good games for us, but it's coming back off a bye. It's like we're now on a 4-week block, I think it is. It's like Teague is back. I think Teague was touch and go for a couple of games there. I think he was even in the 19th man squad spot for this one. So I think he's ready to go. And again, we're a better team when Teague's out there. That then becomes the question, do you put Burns on the bench over a guy like Acco? But I'm not too sure what other injuries and stuff like that we've got going on in the background. But it's going to be interesting, mate.
I said no, no debutantes, but well, NRL debutantes, but club debutantes, you might look to Hohepa. It could be his time. I think he's getting pretty close, and it might depend on the makeup of the team, injuries, who we're playing, etc. But I think Hohepa is going to get a shot sooner rather than later.
What role do you play However in?
I think he's just he's either the utility, so to speak, or he's just another middle.
Yeah, so again, I really like However, and especially that game at Gosford, he tore the Roosters reserve grade side apart, right? But I'm just looking at that again and going, well, if you can't have However and Atkinson on the same bench, like it's just you're
No.
doubling up on utility there. You still have Siffer who does play that utility role. I think
Yes.
However could be really good for us, but we're still going to have that issue with probably go forward with a guy like Cam and However interchanging with Sif as well. But the ball playing we make up for it, and his ability to fill in at 9 could really spark Blake and give Blake a bit of a rest, because Blake is still tackling himself to a standstill. And when we look our best, it's when Blake is playing his best. So maybe it might freshen Blake up a bit as well, because yeah, it could work.
So with that, I would imagine you'd have Cam and Siffer just swapping as per, or not as per. Cam and Siffer would swap, and then Hohepa would be the fourth guy who would get the least minutes.
Yeah, so he's sort of playing that front rower lock type role, and then
Yeah.
Siffer say moves up and things like that, which is what we're
Yeah.
doing with Daniel Atkinson at the moment, right? So
Yes.
I can
Yes.
see the point where it gets to, okay, we're now in June. You know, we know Akko is leaving. We can put the investment of time into Puru. I get that. I'm just still not sure I'm sold on that. But again, if I go back and look at the stats again, Colquhoun was 77 meters, Talakai 82, and Hamanueli 81. Right, so it was a tough day at the office for all the front rowers there. So it probably didn't make too much of a difference, who we put in that role. But I think you've still got enough size there if you got a guy like Puru, because I think he's got more of a defined role for us when he would come on versus Akko, because Akko is not. We're forcing Akko to play like a 13, and he's really a
Yeah.
fullback 5'8", right? So it's hard for that. We're not giving him a chance to succeed as well, I guess what I'm saying.
I don't know if it's a fair comparison, but I really see Hohepa in that Captain America 2016 vibe, where he comes on probably less minutes, but comes on as a middle, but he's an attacking middle almost.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good comparison. And he had Joseph Polo. Is that how you say that? Yeah, he had a really great lower grades career as well when he was out at Penrith and Parramatta. And the raps on him were that he was going to be that next big thing. And he still had a really successful NRL career, and he really did contribute to us as well. And maybe Hohepa could really slot into that role and give us that, because I think defensively would be fine. The one thing I worry about the Sharks is if Fanil Blake is not making huge meters, we can sometimes go in our shell a little bit, right? So I'm always of that mindset. We've got to flood the middle with our giants that we have. But given the Hazleton situation, this could be a chance to try this.
So rather than Atkinson doing it, you'd have a Hohepa, which is preferable as far as getting meters at the very least.
Yeah, and more accustomed to that role, right? And again, he
Yes.
can still give you the link plays and the ball playing and all that type of stuff. He can fill in at hooker. He could probably fill in the halves if you needed him to. You've got Siffer to jump out wide. It probably makes more sense to play Puru there. So it would be really interesting to see what he has to do for Craig Fitzgibbon to make that change, because Akko had to prove himself to Fitz, and he definitely has, given his performances last year and his ability to be dropped into any circumstance. And he obviously really values that quite highly. So it's going to be quite interesting to see if there is a change there. But that could be the spark we need, mate, because there is so much sameness about it, what we do, which I think infuriates a lot of the fans and the diehards, is because there's not a lot of changes week to week, but our performances can fluctuate greatly, right? So perhaps it is that sort of spark that might cause some sort of a change.
The other guy, and you would have watched him playing for the Jets last week, week before last, is Jaden Beryl. And I think that he, at some point, will get more time, much like last year. Now, a very similar role. I mean, obviously, he's more of a hooker, but very similar kind of role he'd be playing for us if he was on our bench. I'm not suggesting it's a battle between those two guys, but I would just keep my eye on those two guys in the next month or two, and that might be a way to spark things up a little bit, but also not lose anything with who you're bringing in.
Yeah, and he's been in our system now for what, 4 or 5 years, right? So, he definitely knows the players, knows the structures and shapes that we've
Yeah.
got. I probably would feel more relaxed with Puru there, just
Mhm.
because he is more of that 13 than forcing Beryl into that mold again.
Yeah.
And I think I would probably trust him a little bit more in the halves than Beryl too. But again,
Yes.
Beryl has shown enough that, if we get quick play the balls and you can put him on against a tight defense, he could really cause some damage. And it's funny when you look at people looking at, expansion teams and that, everyone puts Beryl into the expansion squads, right? So it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up.
Yeah, it could be a happy day for a lot of those guys who, even like a Marwini, those guys who have, really battled year to year to get a contract. They might get some stability, might get a pay rise with these teams coming in. We'll see. So this Saturday evening, my friend, Blake Brayley 150th game.
Oh, wow.
He will become the second hooker to do that for the Sharks. Dean Treaster played around 160, 165 games.
That's incredible.
And a fella called Michael Porter played about the same, but he didn't play every game at hooker. He was a prop as well. So as far as hookers go, yeah, he'll break the record to be our most capped hooker at some point.
It's strange because now that you've said it, I'm looking back and the hookers in my head have kind of gone like Dean Treaster, Corey Hughes for that season of just terrible pain. Kevin Kingston was in there for a while, and then into like Michael Ennis, now into Brayley, right? So, well, Brayley times 2. So, I mean, that's kind of weird to me that we haven't had a hooker outside of Treaster past 150 games. So it's a great milestone, a great stat, mate. So lucky you're a stats guy.
Now he's how old is he? 25, 26 tops?
I think he's about 27 now.
Is he 27? So he has the current longest streak of consecutive games in the NRL, current longest streak. And I think since the early 80s, only Luke Douglas has played more for the Sharks, which is, I think, around 140. So you can see how he's racked up all those you can see how he's racked up all those games in a shorter amount of time. He's not missing any.
Well, I just checked. He turns 27 in September. So, he's been in and around the squad forever. And, outside of that first year where he was kind of coming off the bench for his brother, he's essentially played almost 80 minutes every single week, which is kind of unheard of, right? So for a man his size to get through the work that he does, it's very impressive. And honestly, when he is on in the last 2 years, that's when the Sharks look the best. That's when Nico looks his best. That's when Will Kennedy looks his best. Blake Brayley has I can't believe 2 years ago there was people that were sort of questioning his value to this team because he's become so important to us.
So he could get to 300 playing hooker, which is a pretty amazing feat. But if he keeps trending this way, and I'm not suggesting it'll all be with Cronulla, I hope it is, but he could easily have another, I don't know, 8 or 9 years in him at least, I think. All being well.
Well, I'm just looking at his contract situation now as well, and he's another guy that comes off at the end of 2026. So that first season where the Bears come in, we have a stack of players off contract, right? And I know the club will be well aware of this. Obviously, I'm not breaking any news here that they're not aware of, but it's going to be so important to see those decisions that we make in the next, 6 months between now and November 1st, because you don't want Blake Brayley getting to November 1st and being able to talk to a new franchise team. Now, that team might want to go someone younger, like a Talon De Silva or someone like that might be stuck behind somebody else, like an Api Coruscant. But, yeah, Blake is – has he captained the Sharks? I think he might have had 1 or 2 games, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a real leader at this club. And if you saw Blake in another jersey, I think that'd be a real travesty.
In his second game, I don't remember the circumstances. I'm guessing his brother went down. In his second game, he played 55 minutes. So he was averaging sort of 15, 20 per game, but his second game played 55 minutes.
Yeah, I think something happened to Jaden.
2019, I think it was.
Yeah, it was 2019. That was yeah,
Mm.
and the raps on Blake coming through the lower grades were unreal, and you treat that with a grain of salt because we've all heard these stories of these legendary 20s players and under 18s players that the Sharks had. I'll never forget that crop we had. I think it would have been about 2003. And it was like the Russell Aitkins of the world and the Reese Lovegroves and all these guys that everyone was just like, you've got to see these guys. You got like these guys are the next man. Keith Galloway's the next Gordon Tallis. David Simmons plays like Darren Lockyer.
Yeah.
And yeah, it didn't quite pan out. But Blake Brayley certainly panned out.
Some of them probably panned out, to be fair, but some of them, yeah. I mean, David Simmons, with all respect, was not Darren Lockyer, as you say.
Well, the Russell Aitken one is unbelievable. He played in a grand final for the Melbourne Storm, right? And even the story, I think, of how they signed him was one of those cases of a mistaken identity where they thought they were signing Matt Hilda and they actually picked up Russell Aitken. So, again, it all worked out in the end. But I think it's not a disrespect to those players. It's more so the
No,
caution of when you hear these stories of these
of
urban
course.
legends before you actually get to see it, because
Of
otherwise you can
course.
make yourself look silly. You could create a podcast called Fins Up and base a
Oh,
whole identity around that.
oh boy. We're going for the podcast wars again, eh? What's this, version 4.0?
I spoke to Dan this morning. He's all right.
I'm not worried about Dan. So, I imagine the tall one, Terry and Dan, and a whole bunch of people will be down at Shark Stadium this Saturday, 5:30 kickoff. It's going to be awesome. High flying Warriors, dude. They're going so good. They absolutely wiped the floor with Souths at Homebush yesterday. And South's team was pretty decent. They were still missing some guys, but a pretty decent lineup for Souths. And they just tore them apart. Old boy Metcalf's going really well. I'm assuming he's still leading the Dally M's. And they're going to be a real handful. And they've won 3 out of the last 4 against us. They've won the last 2 at Cronulla in ridiculous circumstances, coming back from, I think, 14-point deficits to win both games, both just horrendous moments in Sharks stadium history, at least. And it's going to be a tough one, man.
You're giving me PTSD, mate, because that was one of the few games where I've actually stormed out of Shark Park, and I think I left there with a few minutes to go because I just like as soon as that try was scored, I was fuming because again, like it was a situation the Sharks shouldn't have been in, pushing silly passes, when they had the lead, like a minute to go. Like it was just a combination of just silly Sharks errors. And I think that was a bit of a turning point for them last year. And I think that was a bit of a turning point for some players' journey with the club and some retention decisions that were made as well, right? So, hopefully we don't have a situation like that, and it's going to be a lot better for us. But those Warriors games can be so tight. Like we beat them early in the year before over in New Zealand when nobody gave us a chance, right? So I think form kind of goes out the window. But this is Fanua Blake's first time up against the Warriors, right? So again, coming off the back of a really disappointing game for the Sharkies, not from Fanua Blake, I think from the rest of the team. I think Fanua Blake was probably one of our best players last week.
Yeah.
I'm really looking at him to kind of take that leadership role and say, follow me, boys, because he should want to take it to these guys.
So most of the Warriors games have been tight this year. I think maybe I think they've had 9 wins. 7 of them have been 6 points or less, something like that. So it's going to be a tight one. And you might want to get the field goal stuff ready for the boys practicing this week. But just all over the park, they're pretty talented. Like their forward pack is super tough. They got a great hooker. Halves are more than decent. One of them's, in theory, the best player in the comp. And really good 3/4 and experienced wingers we've spoken about. I mean, Dallin, he's Jardine's cousin. He comes to Shark Park and just tears us apart every time. So also RTS, one of the most enthusiastic ball runners you've ever seen. So they're pretty stacked. I'm not going there to lose. I think we can win this game. I think the bounce back is going to be a huge thing. Get back to our best form back at home where we play really well. I think that it's going to be fine, but it's going to be a challenge. And I dare say it could be another one of those Sharks Warriors classics, but hopefully it goes the right way this time. I do have a question for you. Which loss was worse? The one last year with the Sean Johnson Magic, or I think it was the year before, or 22, where we gave up like a 20-point halftime lead?
The Sean Johnson field goal for me, mate. That was that was for me. And coming off the back of that one the year before too, it was just one of those things that I was sitting and watching, going, "This can't be happening." And to be fair, like it was a game the Sharks were in control of for like majority of the game, and their tries came so easily that it was you looked up and next thing you know, it was a really tight game. So that Sean Johnson field goal one for me will always rock me to my core. And um, he got a lot of respect at the end of that game, rightly so, given his position in the league and what he's done in the game. But just given how it all kind of went with us and everything like that, and we didn't quite have the success that maybe we had hoped for, like that one kind of hurt, right? But it's a
Yeah.
weird one. Like I don't really look back and consider it. I mean, obviously he's a Shark. He's always going to have that history at the Sharks, but it was just maybe because of the COVID era and all that type of stuff. There's some seasons we played at
Yeah.
Cogra. It doesn't really feel like we have that connection with Sean Johnson. When we signed him, it felt like he was going to be like our guy for. And he even said that. He said, "I thought I was going to play the rest of my career at Cronulla." Just never felt like we got that. Do you know what I mean?
And let's make a mental note. Let's do a summer series, and he'll be one of the guys we talk about, you and I. All right. So remind me in the summertime, Sean Johnson, because what you just said is completely true. Like I've always loved Sean Johnson as a player. Sorry, not loved. I've always liked him as a player. And when he came to Cronulla, I was really excited. And for lots of reasons, by the end of the 3 years, I wasn't blown away. Now, keep in mind, injuries took their part in him not becoming an amazing player for 3 years for us. The second year was one of the better years we've seen from a half. So, not dissing the guy, but you're right. By the end of it, it was just like, is this all we're going to get?
It came and went. Like it was a strange
Yeah.
one, mate.
Yeah. And COVID, you're right. We weren't out at all the games every week, etc. And yeah, interesting one. We'll talk about that over the summer, I think. But yeah, I mean, what have you thought of the Warriors this year? What's impressed you?
Again, another team that people had really low on their lists of people that they thought would do something this year. And if you look at the NRL ladder, you've got teams up in that top four outside of Melbourne that probably a lot of people didn't have there, with Canberra and the Bulldogs and the Warriors. Like they've shown that this is a really open comp, and full respect to the Warriors. Like they've turned their season around. Like at the start when they were playing in Vegas, it was kind of like, "Ooh, what's this?" I
Mm,
spend a lot of time in New Zealand, and even what I was hearing from Warriors fans over there was that they were doing like 2-for-1 tickets, and they were dropping
yeah,
prices this year in anticipation, coming off like a season where they sold out every single home game. That maybe they might not. Like that's what people are asking me. Like, do you think that means that we don't believe in ourselves this year because there's a lot of promos and stuff like that on? I'm not sure, but what they've done this year is unbelievable. And I think Luke Metcalf is a real danger for us. And again, another guy that never really felt like one of us, because again, he came, he left, he came, he left.
yeah,
We never really got that stint with him, but he's turning into a tremendous player. And I think he's going to be an interesting player to watch when you look at contracts and all that type of stuff, because halves, when they get a lot of success in New Zealand, if they don't tend to be Kiwis, tend to put themselves back on the open market to try and get a better landing spot back home. I'm not
yeah.
saying he's going to do that, but I'm saying he's going to have clubs, very interested in him. And I know the Sharks were very interested in him and didn't want to let him go in the first place, right? I'm not saying he's going to come back, but it's just funny how that all works out.
I suggest he's one of the players you don't want to be shirt grabbing on Saturday evening. You want to get your shoulder in there and make sure you get him down, because, as we all know, he's quick as lightning. Kieran, I'm looking forward to seeing you on Saturday. It's going to be a lot of fun. Now, we will keep people posted about our whereabouts beforehand. We think we're going to be at the Hairy Man. We haven't locked it in yet, but we think we're going to be there at some point to have a sherbet or two. So if you would like to come along and hang out and talk Sharks with some of us people, we would love to see you there. But just maybe stick to the socials. Do a few more episodes this week, of course, and we'll try and confirm that a bit more. But at this stage, we'll be at the Hairy Man's pre-game, we think. Correct?
Yeah, look, I think so. I'm just looking to see what the food truck that's going to be there this week, because last time they played at Shark Park, they had a food truck there that had a deep fried pizza.
Yeah,
And
you had these little pizza things,
yeah,
like
that was actually really good.
pizza balls. What were they?
No, so it was kind of like it was like a crepe in a sense in terms of shape and how it looked, but it was like
Yeah.
it was a pepperoni pizza that was deep fried, and so it was kind of like both sides of it were the crunchy crust, and then the pizza was in the middle. So I'm not doing it justice. I was very nervous when I saw it. I thought, I don't know how I'm going to be doing this, but it was actually unbelievable. And I'm just looking at the food trucks. I think it's the same food truck that's going to be there this week too. So
Okay, cool.
yeah, check it out.
All right, sounds good. And how was your trip? You went to New Zealand, is that correct? Last week.
Yeah, I was over in New Zealand Monday through Thursday, I think it was, or maybe
Yeah.
Wednesday night. I got back, and it's a lovely country. It's this time of year, the weather is very, very particular. Like, it can be bucketing down rain sideways and then 20 degrees and nice in the same
Oh,
2 hour period. Bit
okay.
Melbourne-esque in that sort of sense. But the Warriors over there are unbelievably popular. Like, I've
Yeah.
been going to New Zealand for a long time now, and you see just as much Warriors stuff as you do All Black stuff when you're there. Even in the airports, like, you could even buy New South Wales Blues jerseys at the airport, which a couple of years ago, there's no chance you would have seen that there. So yeah, it was pretty nice over there.
If I've done my math correct, and hopefully I have, it's their second best start to a season since the 2002 year when they made the grand final.
Where were you in that 0-2 semi-final against the Sharks when Paul Mellor got hit by a sniper?
The prelim, I
The prelim.
was far side, so across from the tunnel. And I'll tell you exactly where I was. Remember when David Peachy made that break down the sideline? He was ambling along, and I swear to God, he was waving at the crowd. I was there when he got tackled, right there. It was myself, Dr. Cameron Webb, and a few of our other friends. And it was one of the more heartbreaking losses. And I had a good view. I guess we were probably on like the 30 or 20 of that end. Good view of the last try scored from the grubber kick. Not one of Peach's better moments, but yeah, you're right. Other people also played a part in that loss. And it was quite unbelievable. Not to put anything less on the Warriors, but just even the whole thing went down with the passports and the cheap tickets, and all of a sudden it was like, there's going to be 40,000 Sharks fans to no, there's going to be 50,000 Warriors fans. So
we were outnumbered.
Yeah. That was when that Warriors chant went up, and for people who weren't at the game or haven't seen it, a lot of them were behind the posts where the cheap tickets were, but behind the posts held a lot of people, and that Warriors chant went up, and it was scary every time. Just the breadth of that chant, and I mean, it went down to the wire. Bless them. We didn't give in, but we just. It's just one of those Sharks games where it's like, come on, 5% more. You're in the grand final to play the Roosters for the third time in like 4 weeks or whatever. But yeah, pretty heartbreaking, dude. I was there, pretty heartbreaking. I remember actually driving home, and I think I'm correct. Like, someone can confirm this or not, but even back then in 2002, I don't think the finals on the Sunday were live. I feel like it was a delayed game. I could be wrong, but I think it was a delayed game on Channel 9. And I remember driving home, and I rang my mum to tell my mum, hey, it's a heartbreaker. And I think we were worried about my dad's health even at that point. And it was like, just be prepared. It's bad. I remember, I'm sure it was that game, which would make me think it was on delay because I was calling him at like 6:05 or whatever. Maybe that's not right. Was the game at 3:00 and it ended at 5?
It was a Sunday
I don't know.
afternoon. Was a Sunday or a set? I can't remember.
It was Sunday.
It was a Sunday.
I feel like, yeah. Anyways, the point is, it was a heartbreaker.
Oh,
and
it's funny that you mentioned that about the drive home, because one thing that's tattooed in my memory is the drive home. And I was living up the Central Coast, but I was staying at my grandfather's house in North Ryde. And we were in the cheap seats, like behind the goalpost next to all the Warriors fans. And there was like people dressed up as Reg Reagan and the flight steward that Matt Johns was doing at the time, because he was playing for the Sharks and he was on the footy show. It was Steve-O. And like, we were right next to it. And I remember thinking, like, they're going into the game, they're going to get the Roosters again. Like, it's 3 games in 5 weeks or whatever it was. And I was so confident that this was going to be the year. And then it all just happened like it did. And I remember walking out so flat, and my grandpa, God rest his soul, looked at me and said, I'll take you to KFC at Top Ryde. And so I remember the way home, he took me to KFC at Top Ryde. And we just sat there in silence. So we both had traumatic car rides home.
Man, grandparents know. They just know what to do. That's the best. That's awesome.
It still works for me now. Like, just get me some chicken and I'm all right.
Oh yeah. I'm partial to a quarter pounder post game sometimes. Like
Never had a quarter pounder in my life.
it's my go-to. If I'm going
Never
to,
had
it's
one.
my go-to. What do you do?
I'm not a big Macca's guy, but I'm still a child, right? So I still like chicken nuggets.
Oh, you don't even
Although
go.
my favorite burger at Macca's is a double cheeseburger with bacon, and I'll try and get that in a meal, and then I get nuggets as like a side.
Yeah, right. This reminds me of our Vegas trip, but it wasn't Macca's.
Shake Shack.
I was telling my son Chester about Shake Shack last night for some reason. I just had all these great memories of eating food with you and a bunch of people there. And then
Just
I said
bacon everywhere.
it was right across from the hotel. And I looked at him and I went, but it took like 25 minutes to walk there. And he went, what? And I went, oh, whenever in Vegas, you just got to walk everywhere. And he kind of gave me a look. I was like, yeah, don't worry. One day maybe.
And the
Shake Shack.
Gillaroos were there too, right?
They were. That's right.
There you
That's
go.
right.
Right? They heard SharkCast was there. They all asked to be on, but we were on very strict schedules and had to say no.
Yes, maybe another time. I'm looking forward to NRL dub. We're almost there, about a month away. That's going to be exciting. And yeah, it's a good time to be a footy fan. It's getting pretty busy. It's going to be a good couple of months coming up. We'll cover it all on SharkCast for you. Thanks for tuning in to Kieran's show. Catch up with Kieran over coffee about Cronulla. And we'll be back with more episodes throughout the week as per. Hope everyone's doing good. Hope we see you down at the Warriors game. If you can't be there, make sure you got your streaming service or your TV service or your radio service ready. It's going to be a good one, that's for sure. I think one of the better games this week, Kieran. So we'll see everyone down there. Sorry about the tongue twisters today. Kieran, thanks for your time, my friend. Good luck with those Gloria Vanderbilts. And we will talk to you soon. We'll see you soon. Until then, we can't play the song because we didn't get the job done. Up Cronulla. Let's go.